please like and subscribe and enjoy the video. Hello, 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 and welcome to, well, a video that, I haven't done ASMR in a very, very long time, as you know. Hang on, I think I need to, this is the first time me doing one of fursuits. Unfortunately the microphone has to be very high up for some reason. It's a bit annoying, I'm going to be honest with you. I should probably get rid of the preview because I'm like just constantly looking at it for some reason. Yeah, now I don't know what I look like because this is very professional of me. This is very professional. So, hello. It's been a while. I think it's been like about, say, about 9 months to a year. I think it's been quite a while. Yeah, I've been very busy. I had to do my final like high school examinations for American viewers, and British viewers will know that that's A levels. I was doing those. I'd like to say I got two A's, a B and a C. Thank you. I'm the goat, and you can guess what two subjects I got an A in, since there's the ones that I mainly do on this channel, and also my degree as well, philosophy and mathematics, and I got a B in further maths, which for American viewers is almost like when you do college classes in high school for extra credit. It's essentially like that for British people. It's what is our version of it, except it isn't technically college credits, and it's more like, I'm going to university to do maths, and oh wow, I've done the whole of year one essentially in a course at sixth form already. And then the C was in physics, which is really funny because I started out this channel making physics videos, and well, let me shuffle a bit forward. Now, I got a C in it. I didn't revise for it, I'm going to be honest with you. So, as you've seen by the title, it's about ethics, but first I thought, got a water bottle because usually my throat gets very dry making these videos, and I think this is going to be a long video, maybe not. I might be rambling on for a while. By the way, the elephant in the room, I've got a fursuit head. This is Ro, he's a collie, he's my other OC, as well as Vakulf / Jacob, depending how I'm feeling. He's a collie mixed with a Labrador, and I love him to pieces. His character is a priest, so my next, or 2 videos, sorry, because I promised I was going to do a video on calculus, is going to be on like a role play with this character. That'll be coming soon. I'm going to make more videos. I actually really enjoy making these videos, and I've now got a lot higher quality of a setup, as if you can't notice, because looking at my first video, it's not very good. I paid the £1.50 for Droid Cam Pro, and I've got a better camera now, a better phone, sorry, anyway, but this flask cost me £8. I needed a water bottle, as I was constantly using disposable cups in university to get my water, so I thought I'll probably get a water bottle, probably be better hydrated, so. Unfortunately, the water in this building isn't particularly that nice, and for some reason it gets warm very quickly, and that's the cold water. The warm water gets boiling hot. It's very, very annoying. It's very, very annoying. It gets literally boiling, scalding hot. Anyway, I've probably just spent the past 4 or 5 minutes rambling on about my life. I should probably get to the video. So, what even is ethics? I'm doing a video about something and about ethics, and I haven't even said what it is. Ethics is a study in how we live, essentially. It's how one should live. If we were to live a good life, what would that good life look like, almost? So, it presupposes that we all live in a ethical community, and in a lot of ethical theories, there is a presupposition of. So, if you don't know what presupposition is, it means essentially implying, like, already thinking something exists without stating it exists. Very common in mathematics. There'll be a lot of if you've ever done mathematics, which I've assumed at school, you will presuppose a couple of axioms, as we say, so rules, before you do it, just to make life a bit easier, because you're not going to tell 7-year-olds about how there are certain axioms in which you can derive everything else from proof-wise, because that doesn't seem practical for what most of them are going to do in later on in life, to teach them the nits and gritties of pure mathematics. Anyway, we're essentially presupposing there is an absolute truth out there, and as we'll later discuss, we'll get into why that might not be the case, and that there might not be an absolute truth. Not to say that there isn't a truth about ethics or ethical claims, just that there might not be an absolute truth in which every situation follows. And ethics then becomes what is right and wrong, as you probably has guessed, but this is very different there are very different theories, and a lot of theories have benefits, have drawbacks of everything, and can be beneficial to some people, can be beneficial for society, but maybe not an individual. Anyway, we're going to go right back 3,000 years now to Aristotle, who created a theory of ethical framework based on virtue. And you may wonder how you create a virtue-based ethics. Well, he essentially stated an ethical theory which was character-based, so based on the person, and that so not a single ethical act is immoral or moral, just more a collection of acts together creates an ethical or unethical person, almost. So Aristotle does this, and he gives some foundations for us. So he says that every human has a goal which separates us from animals in some way. We'll get onto that later, but he says that humans should strive for human flourishing, or in the Greek term for it, eudaimonia. Eudaimonia, 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 eudaimonia. That is what humans should strive for, and we achieve eudaimonia by doing virtuous acts and not doing it's on the top of my tongue, alright? Vices, and not doing vices. So, for example, a virtue may be bravery, but there might be a vice of excess, of callousness, and a vice of deficiency, of cowardice. So, what is a vice of excess? A vice of excess is like when you have too much of something. So, Aristotle was very big on this idea that there's this perfect thing. It's like how some people used to believe that on the 3DS there was a perfect 3D-ness on the original 3DS. I don't know. If you're a bit younger than me, or you're a bit too old, you might not know this, or maybe you never even was big into Nintendo internet culture in 2014 and 13. But they believed there was like this perfect mean, and that's the same in Aristotelian virtue ethics. He believed that there was a perfect middle, and that was for bravery, for, like, charging into battle, slicing enemies. But when it becomes overwhelming, you retreat. Callousness is when you're driving into battle, but even though you need to retreat, you don't retreat, so like a Vikings would. And cowardice was like you don't even turn up to the battle. Anyway, he believe that by doing these golden means, as he would call it, these virtues, that you would become a better person, which is true. So, for example, um, let's say you see a homeless person. A virtuous person might do the virtue of the golden mean of being generous and giving money, but someone with a vice. But if you could also be less virtuous in that sense and not give them money or give them too much money, and these are vices of excess and deficiency. And by doing virtues, you're going towards the goal of eudaimonia, 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 eudaimonia. And by getting to that, by doing these acts, you're going towards that goal. And one of the benefits of virtue ethics is, well, that goal is firstly reached when you die, which is a good thing because you have a whole lifetime to make yourself a better person, and it doesn't matter. One act doesn't make you moral or immoral. It's a collection of acts. But a downside is that it's quite vague, really. And when we get onto applied ethics, you'll find this out because a lot of stuff can be moral and immoral simultaneously from which way you look at it, and it can be quite hard to decide from this framework what is right and what is wrong. And so we'll go on to our next ethical theory I'm going to teach you, called situation ethics. Hang on, let me probably should just checking how long I've been recording for. 12 minutes. Okay. I'm a bit terrified that I'll lose all this footage or something. It's a bit scary. I don't know. I wouldn't even mind re-recording this video. Anyway, situation ethics is an ethical theory which is a Christian theory, and you may wonder, how can you have an ethical theory based on Christianity? Surely you should just follow the Ten Commandments and the word of Jesus. Well, the word of Jesus is the key aspect of this theory. So, situation ethics has four sorry, it's gone out of my mind. So, in situation ethics, you have what Fletcher describes as four presumptions. So, and he calls them presumptions because obviously Fletcher sort of knows around this time, and also what ethics is around this time, because this is after the Second World War. So you have movements like absurdism, existentialism rising. So ethics, almost under these frameworks, becomes sort of nihilistically meaningless, not meaningless. Ethics as a framework of control. Anyway, that's another video. I'm going in the basics of ethics here. Anyway, Fletcher's situation ethics essentially describes that the four. I'm having a brain fog here. Fog here. Four presumptions. So one of them, personalism. Personalism is just says that, ethics is it's about the person, it's about you, and so each person is different, and so ethics should work differently for different people, because what might be ethical for one person and what might be not ethical for another person changes, and that changes how the situation should be. Then you have positivism. So this is, you should follow the word of Jesus. Jesus to Fletcher, as a Christian, as a Protestant Anglican Christian, he is the ultimate truth. He is the divine, so you must follow him because he also was a nice guy. So even if you're, there's an argument to be made for Fletcher's situation ethics from an atheist standpoint that even if you're not religious, Jesus was a nice guy and did nice things. So why not follow him? Um, Positivism, pessimism, pragmatism. What you're doing and how you solve an ethical theory should be practical. For example, solving the obesity crisis, you can't just like hope that you've developed an even more miracle drug than Ozempic to, just let all the fat walk away. Reference to a Doctor Who episode. You can't do that. You have to be practical and help people by going on diets, supporting diets, funding people to get weight loss surgery, stuff like that. You can't just hope that something miracle happens. Then you have relativism. So you have to realize that people come from different cultures, backgrounds, and that means that you have to treat that with due respect and due cause. Sorry, that's my flatmates. You have to treat that with due respect and due cause. So, for example, what might be ethical in, for example, France might be very, very different in Cambodia or Vietnam. Like, they have different cultures and different ways of viewing the world and life, and so you have to accept that in a moral framework. And I think this is quite nice, because a lot of Western philosophers, like Kant, as we'll see later, in their moral frameworks, they're very centered to their own culture and look for a lot of their own cultural bias. And Kant especially, he does something called Prussianism, as I'll get into later, where he essentially enforces his own Germanic view on morality. It's quite interesting. Anyway, this is quite nice. And then he has the six or five presuppositions. I always get it wrong. Where stuff like loving is not liking and stuff like that. There are these rules, but Fletcher also has a goal, and he calls it agape, 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 agape. And agape is, well, doing the most loving thing. And we're talking about love in a Jesus kind of way, just loving for the sake of loving. And, for example, this might be again, with a homeless person, the most loving thing to do to that homeless person may be to give him money. Giving them money, regardless of what they spend it on, to give them money may be the most moral thing. And this is what Fletcher is, and this is what sets Fletcher apart. Fletcher's ethical theory from a lot of others is that, well, from even the smallest differences in a moral moral case, it can be very, very different based on how you approach that, based on how you approach it. Let's get my notes back up. So, what we've been talking about so far, have I missed anything? I'm trying to think. I might be going a bit too fast. I'm not sure. Have I missed anything? I think I explained that pretty well. Yeah, I don't think I'm missing anything. If I miss anything and you're a fellow philosophy student, please tell me, because it has been about 6 months since I've done any of this. By the way, as I'm recording this, I'm procrastinating writing an ethics essay, because it is on animal ethics, and that is really boring. I'm about to literally talk about animal ethics in a bit, but anyway, it's boring because I've literally done it about 20 different essays on it in sixth form, high school, depending where you're from. So what we're moving on to is something called deontological ethics, and that's so what we were previously talking about with Fletcher and Aristotle was something called teleological ethics, so goal-based, a goal that reads teleological, goal-based, goal-based, whilst we're now moving on to deontological, which is duty-based. And so Aquinas gives us, who was essentially the first to sort of write about an ethical Christian framework, because Aquinas realizes that a lot of what the Bible says, yeah, it's nice to say these kind of things, but it's quite hard to do it in practice. So, and I think out of all the ethical theories I'm about to tell you about, deontological ones like Kant and Aquinas are some of the most huge, the crazy, massive, big theories that. So there is a very high chance I will miss something out, because there is so much to talk about with these theories. Anyway, Aquinas says that there are 5 primary precepts. These are things that you must not break. Okay, must not break. Okay, this is worship. So you must worship your Lord, your God. Okay, you must worship Him. Anything that breaks that is immoral. You must keep order in society. So Aquinas believes that, order in society is a must thing, and this feeds into worship. Without order in society, how are you supposed to go to church? How are you supposed to worship? Reproduce. You must be banging the missus. You must be banging the tarts, all right? Or not really the tarts, because Aquinas isn't probably going to like slags. Sorry, queens. Anyway, learn. You must be trying to develop yourself, get better, understand the world more. God made you intelligible. It means that you can understand the world. So use that and defend the innocent. You must do everything you can to make sure that you defend innocent people from immorality and sin. These are your 5 primary precepts. He then gives you secondary precepts. So these are things which help to increase or develop the 5 primary precepts. So, for example, one secondary precept might be, well, if you're becoming a doctor, you're not only defending the innocent, but you're also learning as well. And you may even argue you're keeping order in society as well. So, or you could become a teacher, for example, become a pastor. Doing these things. It's about doing these things in the world, or donating to charity. These are secondary precepts. Okay. And then Aquinas gives us something called the doctrine of the double effect, and this is very, very key, because it's a very key part, and sets them out from any other, apart from Kant, absolute theory, because he says that, well, although, for example, if we're going to applied ethics here, euthanasia is wrong. Well, he doesn't say this because he doesn't know what euthanasia is, because he's from the 12th century, 13th century, Italy. I'll put it on screen. Anyway, if, for example, euthanasia, if your intention is not to kill that person, for example, and by trying to give them a life-saving treatment, you kill them, he would say that you're not in the wrong, because your intention was to make their life better, and instead you accidentally killed them. He said you wouldn't be wrong. Or, for example, you try and deliver a baby and you accidentally give a miscarriage. That would also be completely that. There wouldn't be any immorality in there, because your intention was to deliver the baby. Aquinas also gives us something called proportionalism. So he says if there is an appropriate reason. By the way, everything I've said before, the Catholic Church has got it in its doctrine, but proportionalism it still rejects. So in the 14th century, about 50 years after Aquinas died, he was canonized and made a saint, and a lot of his work was made into canon law. as it were. Um, but proportionalism is the idea that sometimes it may be okay to break a rule, and that this is only very specific circumstances, very, very, very specific circumstances, incredibly. For example, it sort of goes into the doctrine of double effect, but I think one, if you're in a very fatal car crash and there's no chance of you surviving, but you're currently in agonizing pain, it might be okay for you to kill yourself. That might be okay, because even though in the Bible it says this is immoral and you should never kill yourself, but if you're in so agonizing pain, it might be the best thing to do is to kill yourself. Um, but never kill yourself unless there is no chance of recovery. That's something I always say, and you never know, there might be recovery. So this is where it's a bit iffy, where proportionalism gets a bit iffy. I might be wrong as well, because literally my ethics teacher in year 12 and year 13, she glided over it. She went past proportionalism, went past it. So I don't know, but you are loved. You are loved, and that is what Fletcher would say. You are loved. Agape. Agape. I don't. It's because I've mentioned suicide now, and I feel like that's a bad thing. YouTube's gonna kill this video. I might have to bleep out that word, because and I mean cut it out, because YouTube will get at me for that. Trying to think, what else could I say about Aquinas? We'll go back to Aquinas later, but I'm gonna take a break, get my mask off, and rehydrate. But you can watch me rehydrate. Remember to stay hydrated. My nose is too big. My little snoot is too big. It's too big. My snoot is too big. Also, if I have got anything wrong, which I say this in every video, if you believe I've got anything wrong, please comment. Okay. So I took a couple-minute break because it gets a bit roasty. It gets a bit roasty in here. I'm sure if any other ASMR creators who film in their fursuit head can definitely attribute that after about 30 minutes, it does get a bit roasty in here. And it's quite interesting because if I drink after being my fursuit head, one time I drank. I know I'm getting rambles here, but I was at Animals and I had like, I think cider. But yeah, I think it was like 5.5, 5.6% cider after being my fursuit head for about 2 hours, and I've never gotten that tipsy over a single, never gotten that tipsy over a single pint. It's crazy. But anyway, side tangent over. So another deontological ethics theory is Kant. So a lot of you may already know Kant, or you'll especially already know Kant if you already know his genealogy on morality, or any form of writing that he's done on morality. But Kant is essentially the epitome, the epistone of the Enlightenment, of rationality and rational beings. So my flatmate, Kant says that something is either right or wrong just by definition, almost. Categorically, he says so. You have regular imperatives. You have, I must do my homework if I want to pass this class. You're doing that imperative just for the goal of passing the class, but Kant goes, no. Morality, you should just do for the sake of doing it. So he calls it a categorical imperative. He says, you must do this just for the sake of doing this. So Here's three formulations of the categorical imperative. You have universalizability, the practical imperative, and the kingdom and end. Okay. Universalizability, whatever you do must be able to universalize for every single event that's ever taken place. Everything that ever has happened or ever will happen, this must be always moral then and now. Okay? So for example, Kant says, do not kill, do not kill, do not kill. He says that you must never kill, and that killing is always wrong because you're using as a person as a means to an end. And so it's in your duty never to use a person as a kill and use someone as a means to an end. Okay? So even if, I'm sorry my American viewers, even if someone enters your property with a knife threatening to, run rampage, you still cannot shoot them. You may disarm them, you may hurt them in some way. Kant would say that that's completely within your reason to do that if they're trying to come and attack you. You cannot not kill. He also says that you must not lie. So if Kant uses a classical example, if an axe murderer comes to your door and says, I want to kill your fine furry femboy hus, you cannot you have to tell him where the fine femboy furry hus is. Or you can be like, I saw them on the con floor 2 hours ago. That is okay. You can use a white lie. Well, technically not. That's not a white lie. You can't white lie. You have to say that you saw them on the con floor 2 hours ago, because that is true. The second formulation is the practical imperative, and this is do unto others as you would want done to yourself, or the golden rule. They're very, very similar. So if you don't want to be touched inappropriately or smell bad around other people, like smell terrible smelling people, then you know what? Do that yourself. Don't smell bad, and don't inappropriately touch other people at conventions. It's that simple. That's why Kant's cooking here. Kant's cooking. He's cooking with this. The final one, the third formulation of the categorical imperative, is the kingdom and ends. Kingdom of ends. And it says, if you were a rule maker and you were devising a rule for this, how would you do so? So, for example, if it's how to have respectful conduct in a convention, for example, you could think about, well, if I was at a convention, I was a owner of a convention, and I ran a convention, Furry convention, how would I devise rules to ensure that there was respectful conduct, and how would that look like? That can allow you to act in a very ethical way. And although this is a deontological absolute theory, same with Aquinas' natural moral law, as we were previously talking about, I'd like to also say the two ones previous to that, Fletcher and Aristotle, they were both relative theories, but we'll get more into that later. So the reason you're doing this is for the summum bonum, and this is happiness in the afterlife. So you never do an ethical act just to make yourself happy. So, for example, if you're just straight up hating and causing drama on a person just because everyone else is doing it, and it makes you feel happier, that's not a reason why. But if you're doing it, you're hating and you're causing drama on a person just because they're a twat, then Kant would say that that's an ethical thing to do, because if they're being a twat, maybe that might be a reasonable punishment for them being a twat. Anyway, it was a really bad example. Never use that example. It was a really bad example. I'm trying to link it to the fairy fandom. Anyway, um, anyway, so Kant also says you have use phimosis, so you use your practical reason to do your ethics, and that once you have rationalised what is the most ethical thing to do, you must do it. You must, must, must do it. You must do it. Also, all these previous ethical theories and the one I'm talking about just apply for humans. So for Kant, oh, actually, I'll get onto this later. Actually, no, and we'll get onto our final, well, second to last ethical theory. I'm going to talk about another one very, very later on, but we're going to talk about utilitarianism. Utilitarianism. This was developed by Bentham. Bentham argued from the act of utility, which says that whatever is good is what causes the greatest pleasure for the greatest number and the least suffering / least pain for the few. And this theory is probably one of the most discussed theories ever. I don't think there is this. I think an evolution. I think are some of the most topical theories throughout history. I think since the 18th century and since the 20th century and 19th century, there has been nothing so discussed as those two theories. Anyway, Bentham. Bentham's theory is essentially that it is very, very simple. It is very, very simple, and it's been expanded by two other people. So you have Bentham's theory, which is called act utilitarianism because it is just action based. You have rule utilitarianism by Joseph Smith. Is it Joseph? No, Stuart Mill. Stuart Mill? Joseph Mill? Mill. John Stuart Mill, I think it was. I don't know why Mills just got knuckle punched by my microphone in the stomach because my big ass snoot. Anyway, Mill says that there are higher and lower pleasures, and the higher pleasures are worth more than the lower pleasures. So he says, for example, learning something very difficult, listening to classical music, reading, these are higher pleasures, and then stuff like eating, sex, these are all lower pleasures. Yeah, furries. Drawing furry art is a higher pleasure, whilst having gay furry sex is a lower pleasure. Anyway, so that's how Mill's theories go. But we have our last one, and we'll get into a lot. We're about to get into this. This leads very nicely into our second topic. This is from oh, my mind keeps going blank. Oh my god. Peter Singer. Peter Singer is called, and it's called preferential utilitarianism, and preferential utilitarianism argues that the preference, not only what's most pleasurable for the greatest number, but the preference of said number should also be considered as well, because some people may also prefer pain, so the preference should be considered above the pleasure of these things. And so this leads on very nicely into applied ethics, and we're going to go straight into animal ethics. And so Peter Singer argues that, well, and so does utilitarianism. Utilitarianism argues that animals are just as valuable as humans, with Bentham saying that, soon as how the Frenchmen have realised that the black man is the same as the white man, we'll soon realise that animals are the same as humans, because animals have the same capacity as an infant child. And so if we're viewing the infant child as the same as the animal, as not the same as the animal, then surely we should just think that these are things are the same because they suffer. And Peter Singer, famously, he argues that, well, it used to be that women, black people, homosexuals, weren't given the same rights, and that one of the arguments from Taylor, a renowned English philosopher, argued that, well, if we give women's rights next, then surely we're going to give animals rights next. So, and animals can't have rights. Singer says, well, both of them can have rights. Women and animals can have rights. And Singer, he argues that, well, animals have rights as the same as humans, but not in the sense that a pig should be able to vote or a monkey should be able to go to university. It's the same as if the monkey wants the banana, he should be able to have the banana and not be genetically experimented on. That's what Singer argues. And he does this through utilitarianism, saying that, well, the monkey has a preference to be in the jungle, swinging around, eating bananas all day, not in a factory being genetically modified and tested on for cosmetic purposes. This shouldn't be the case. They shouldn't suffer. Anyway, this whilst other ethical theories, so Kant argues that, well, animals just are below humans. They aren't rational beings. They shouldn't be accounted for, and so you may use them as you will. Just as you use them is quite reflective on how you are as a person, how you treat other humans. This is very similar to what Fletcher also argues as well. Fletcher, for example, would allow factory farming if it allows more people to have cheaper meat and be able to feed themselves for cheaper. He would say that's the most loving thing to do, even if it technically, the act itself isn't that agapeic, it is still a good thing to do. Aquinas just generally wouldn't give a damn. He would just say, because in Genesis 1, God gives us dominion and stewardship over animals, so we may use them as we please. We can do whatever we want with them. And he says that the killing of an animal is more like theft and that of actually killing something, which is very interesting. Virtue ethics, Aristotle argues from the hierarchy of souls, and so does Aquinas as well, that humans are just below angels and God, angels, humans, animals, plants, and then things that don't exist. He says there's a hierarchy of souls, and everything above them may use the thing below as it wills, so humans may use animals as they will. And there's other interesting applied topics as well, like theft. So, for example, situation ethics may say that stealing from Lidl Bakery may be the most agapeic thing to do. If you're stealing some bread to feed your family, or a strudel, or cookies, that is the most agapeic thing to do. Whilst Kant might argue that, well, you're using Lidl and the workers of Lidl as a means to an end, as a means to your own pleasure of, it may not be the most ethical thing to do. And Aristotle, Aquinas may argue that, well, you're disrupting order in society by doing that, but you may be also defending the innocents. So it's a mixed bag with that. Whilst Aristotle would say that stealing is always done out of jealousy, so you should never do it. It's always done out of jealousy, you should never do it. Never do it. In the same way that how Aquinas and Kant both argue that you should never lie. But back to animal ethics, because applied ethics, I don't think there is anything real more apart from poverty, but poverty is boring. It's very obvious what you do with poverty. Actually, you know what? It's not my notes, but I will actually get into this because I think it's very relevant for today. There's a very big ethical movement called Oh, it's just literally was just thinking about it as well. Peter Singer has famously actually gone against his utilitarianism and has adopted this. It is called fuck. It is called effective altruism. Has become very popular recently, and that is to say that well, surely we should just spend all our excess wealth, so everything we earn apart from our rent, um, like food, such bills should be given to the poor of the South, the global poor, homeless, etc. Um, and we shouldn't keep ourselves. But as you can immediately class, there is so many practical issues with this theory. Is that like, firstly, how do you know a lot of charities are tax write-offs? A lot of them actually don't even help the people. I literally have my phone on silent. Why is it going off? I have it on silent. Sorry. Um, like a lot of these charities don't actually go to the people. Don't actually go to help them. They just, you know, don't actually go to the people that help them. It just usually they just again go into advertising and such. Don't actually go there. And also, a lot of the times, charities overlay what the actual thing is. So, for example, a lot of people still have this very outdated view of Africa as very poor, loads of poor people that don't, that are starving and dehydrated. But the thing is that that may be only true for a couple of African nations these days, and that most of them are pretty well off. That obviously a lot of them may not be as rich as Western countries, but they're still a lot of them are developing nations, which are, and some of them are past developing nations. Yet for some reason we have this weird Western perception of developing nations like Botswana. It's my flatmate again. Um, I know this is a little rant now about the global south, but a lot of these nations aren't developing. A lot of them are high income countries, um, and even though there's still a lot of imperialism in the south, I think effective altruism just is a sort of this imperialistic way of just wanting to exploit each other to minimise exploitation. It's a bit bizarre. Anyway, side note on on effective altruism aside, um, we're going to go back to animal ethics. So we've got a preferential utilitarianism versus um, argument from marginal cases. So argument from marginal cases for animals is an argument saying that well, it's very similar to what I previously said, that its main proponent being Frey, who argues that if we can see that like people in a vegetative state, coma, and like children and infants are the same as a lot of animals in some intellectual rationality kind of way, then surely we either say that well we don't use animals because they're the same value as these people, or we instead use these people as instead of the animals, like vegetative people, um, children, babies. And this sounds, I know, absolutely far-fetched. The fact that this idea of using babies for it seems like some Trump propaganda that the fucking that the Democrats want to experiment on aborted babies, for example. But Frey argues that this should be the case then. It's a very weak argument if you can't tell. It's not a very good argument. Many people argue that in actual fact that intelligence isn't everything. Secondly, that there is an ability to rationality. There is the capacity to rationalize. That a chimpanzee doesn't have the same capacity to rationalize as the for example, as an infant child or a person in a vegetative state. And also that these people can actually leave that state and become rational beings once again. Like you can't see a chimpanzee becoming more rational or less rational. It's the rationality of a chimpanzee. Um, Although this view does have a lot of components because it is pretty sound, apart from when you realise the premises are a bit iffy. So there is a lot of proponents of this case. It's like you might have heard some like vegetarians and vegans arguing this off. Why don't you eat a disabled person? Anyway, we're going to go on to meta-ethics. I know this has been a bit of a quick whistle-stop tour, but it's an introduction. And if you want me to go into any more detail on some of these views, then please put in the comments below. My next video is planned to be on calculus, but we're going on to meta-ethics. So, what really is right or wrong? Right or wrong? Right or wrong? What really are these things? Well, for something to be right, we may say that, well, utilitarianism says that it has to be the most pleasurable thing for the greatest number. Also, I'll leave you to put in the comments what your criticism of utilitarianism is, because I forgot to say. Utilitarians will say it's the great pleasure for the greatest number, whilst some other people might just say being nice. Like, what is goodness? Is it inherent? Is it an actual thing? Like, in Confessions, Saint Augustine argues that goodness is a substance, and that the absence of goodness is evil. Whilst we might say that neither of these substances existed, or Confucianists would argue that there are opposing forces in the world, and that good versus evil, ignorance versus wisdom. These opposing forces are constantly a battle with each other. So there is all the Manchus in Saint Augustine's time in Confessions, as he says that they would argue there are also these opposing forces of good and evil. But do these substances really exist? Is this a thing? Is this an absolute thing, a relative thing, or who knows? And so that's what meta-ethics says. So we can actually divide these ethical theories we've talked about into subcategories. So we have cognitive realist theories. So cognitivist realist theories may be like virtue ethics, situation ethics, utilitarianism. These are real theories because their goal is achievable in the actual world. I'm not quite sure about virtue ethics. I don't know. I always feel like eudaimonia is kind of metaphysical in some way, so it's not in the actual physical world. It's something somewhere else, because I don't know. Human flourishing is a bit of not really a interesting idea. Whilst Kantian ethics and Aquinas, they are anti-realist, so they're not in the world, because, as you remember, Kantian ethics is summum bonum. It's the happiness in the afterlife to be with God. And I actually it's just come into my mind. I remember there needs to be I think it's 3 bits of practical. I'll put it in the subtitle. But 3 bits of practical wisdom. 3 things that need to exist for this to be true. You need immortality, God, and is it rationality? Free will. Yeah, free will, God, and immortality. These are the 3 things that need to exist for the summum bonum to happen. Anyway, because the summum bonum is in the afterlife, it is metaphysical, so it's anti-realist. It's not in the physical world. And same with Aquinas. The goal is beatific vision, so to be with God. And then you may wonder, what's non-cognitivist then? Non-cognitivism is something called emotivism. So emotivism is just saying that ethical theory in reality is just boo, murder, yay, charity, boo, animal abuse, yay, meat consumption, or for example, it's just those, it's boo, yays. A lot of people will say that this is a bit too simplistic, and that you're just going to say, for example, if you went to like a Nazi concentration camp, it's just actually going boo, genocide, boo. That just doesn't seem like it is. It just seems a bit more like more complicated than that. Anyway, um, so we're going to go on to our last bit. So, thing is with realist arguments, so like utilitarianism, they commit something called the naturalistic fallacy, which is that they simplify goodness to something which is already in its simplest form. So, goodness is already in its simpler form, or goodness is what it is. It's just good, it's things that are good. So, saying that pleasure equals good, or as John Stuart Mill says, desire equals happiness, which equals pleasure. These things are just two simplifications. They're not. The thing is that this isn't a like kind of fallacy. This is more of like a fallacy. So it's very. It doesn't mean these ethical theories are wrong to say. They're just like it's almost a weakness about them. But it's really funny because the proponent of against like naturalistic normative ethical theories, G.E.Moore, he gives us one of the I think honestly what I believe to be one of the worst ethical theories ever, called intuitionism, and it just argues that, well, you have an intuition which is like infallible, just never wrong. So if you killed someone, like, then it's morally right, and it's like, what the fuck are you on? What are you on about, mate? Like, if you have a serial killer that kills someone because it was his intuition that killed someone, it's okay. It's like the Vikings; their intuition would say that they have to kill as many like people that are not Vikings as possible because they've been brought up in that cultural way. It's a bit far fetched almost. There is a slightly better one by W.D. Ross. He argues that the intuition is infallible, so it does make it's fallible. It does make mistakes, and that it can also have these duties, which gets like I don't know what the word is. It's like they can you have multiple duties that are conflicting with each other. So he gives you the prima facie duties. So he says that, like, be good to your parents and like do not kill and this kind of stuff. Like, these are your duties which are like more important than other ones, for example. And yeah, I think that is my very quick whistle-stop tour of ethics done. If you have any comments or any questions, please ask me in the comments. I'd be happy to answer them. Yeah, and also sorry that it's been so long since I have made a ASMR video. I have been very, very busy, very, very busy, very busy, very busy, and so this is why I have sort of not been making videos, but I hope to get to make making videos back again, because I do enjoy this. This is really, really fun for me. I think it's great revision as well. Like, keeps my mind active and alive, not me playing parts of the Vine 4 for 6 hours. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please like and subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter if you want to. Sorry, my blue sky is a bit weird. Probably don't want to give it out. Or my other Twitter. Any of you come from my other Twitter, you naughty, naughty boys, do not be commenting about the other Twitter. Shh. Okay. Right. Have a good sleep, good rest of the day, whatever. I literally put ASMR videos on as I do maths. ASMR literally got me through my A-levels. Anyway, goodbye. Goodbye.